Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at a place that pretty much challenges everything we know about human settlement. We're heading deep into Siberia to explore what is absolutely the most geographically questionable major city on Earth. It's a place shrouded in this cinematic winter darkness, where simple survival is a daily, grueling battle, and yet, hundreds of thousands of people stubbornly call it home. We're talking about Yakutsk.
Okay, let's dive into this, because to really understand Yakutsk, you first have to grasp the visceral reality of its cold. -64 degrees Celsius. That is not a typo. That's the absolute lowest recorded temperature in this city, plunging to an almost unimaginable extreme. To put that into perspective, entire weeks can go by where the temperature never even rises above -40. It's this deep, ruthless freeze that fundamentally changes how the physical world operates.
The immediate physical dangers of a climate like this are just staggering. I mean, if you step outside unprepared, your exposed fingers can suffer frostbite in literally 3 to 7 minutes. But it's not just the human body that breaks down. At these extremes, the engine oil in your car thickens into this slushy glue. Fuel lines freeze, batteries just die. Tires actually split open from the cold, and even solid metal becomes so brittle it can crack. Because of this, residents will often leave their cars running for hours, sometimes all night long. It turns massive parking lots into these steaming fields of idling vehicles.
Which leads us to some truly bizarre everyday adaptations. If you wander into a fish market in Yakutsk during the winter, you are not going to see rows of humming mechanical freezers. No way. Instead, vendors just lay their fish out on outdoor tables, completely exposed to the open air, for days or even weeks at a time. The ambient air outside is significantly colder than any commercial freezer you could ever plug into a wall. It is literally the perfect natural preservation system.
Section 1. The Ultimate Geographic Anomaly.
Now you might be wondering, okay, is this just a tiny, rugged outpost of scientists and explorers? Well, let's look at the sheer scale of where we are. Yakutsk is the capital of Russia's Sakha region, which is monstrously huge. It's roughly twice the size of Alaska. If you dropped it over the United States, it would swallow the entire eastern half of the country. Yet, across this unimaginably vast, empty territory, there are fewer than 1 million people. And strangely, nearly 40% of that entire population, around 400,000 people, are densely concentrated right here, in this single brutal capital.
Which really forces us to ask the ultimate question, right? Why? Why build a 400,000-person metropolis in an environment that is objectively hostile to human life? We're not talking about a collection of log cabins here. Yakutsk has universities, theaters, shopping malls, and high-rise apartment buildings. To figure out why humanity stubbornly planted a metropolis in the ice, we have to look back at history.
Section 2. The Why. Fur, gold, and diamonds.
It turns out, Yakutsk is basically the real-world equivalent of a late-game settlement in a strategy video game. It was founded purely to extract immensely valuable resources from a really hostile map. It all kicked off back in 1632. Russian explorers were hunting for furs to use as currency, so they set up a small fort on the Lena River to collect tribute from the indigenous Sakha people. For centuries, it was just this remote, freezing fur outpost of a few thousand people. But then, the 20th century hit. In 1923, Soviet geologists discovered massive gold deposits, and then, in 1954, they hit the absolute motherlode, the Zarnitsa diamond pipe.
But extracting that initial gold came at a tremendous human cost. The Soviet government under Stalin realized pretty quickly that not enough voluntary laborers were willing to brave the deadly Siberian winters to mine gold. So they relied heavily on involuntary labor. The Sakha territory, which is largely isolated by thousands of kilometers of freezing wilderness, effectively acted as a massive prison without walls. Roughly 100 gulag camps were established across the territory, and over 50,000 prisoners were imported to harvest the gold under absolutely brutal conditions. It was a dark, foundational era that rapidly inflated the region's population.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale of the diamond discovery that followed in the 1950s. The Sakha territory turned out to be the most diamond-rich area in the world outside of southern Africa. By the end of the 20th century, this frozen wilderness was producing a staggering 25% of the entire global supply of diamonds. This industry alone has pumped over $1 billion annually into the economy since the 1960s. That is what financed the creation of a modern city from scratch.
And of course, this massive influx of wealth triggered explosive growth for the city itself. To staff these enormous diamond and gold operations, the Soviets offered salaries roughly 4 times greater than the national average. This incredible incentive caused Yakutsk to just boom.
The population jumped from around 10,000 people in 1926 to over 186,000 by 1989. People were literally braving the coldest temperatures on Earth for the chance at a really lucrative payday.
Section 3. Engineering on melting permafrost.
So we know why people moved here, but how do they actually survive? Well, the core issue is permafrost. That's soil that remains permanently frozen year-round, often for thousands of years, and it extends up to 300 meters deep. Now you might be thinking, hey, frozen solid ground sounds like a great sturdy foundation, but it's actually a massive counterintuitive trap. If you build a heated structure directly on the ground, the warmth from the building seeps down and it melts the ice beneath it. The frozen soil turns into sinking mud, the foundation cracks, and the whole building collapses.
This brilliantly illustrates how the city relies on some truly wild engineering to combat this. Almost every structure in Yakutsk is elevated. Engineers drill stilts up to 10 meters deep into the earth and lift the buildings up, allowing freezing air to circulate underneath so the permafrost stays completely intact. Furthermore, burying utilities would also melt the ground, so all the water pipes, heating ducts, and electrical wires are routed above ground. It gives the whole city a very bizarre, almost cyberpunk aesthetic. But, it's not a perfect system. As global warming causes the Arctic to heat up rapidly, the permafrost is melting anyway, causing sidewalks in the city to warp like speed bumps and buildings to noticeably sag.
And the environment has another trick up its sleeve. The temperature variation here is just wild. While the deep winter hits -60 degrees, creating this cinematic ice fog where warm breath freezes instantly into hovering clouds, the short summers actually soar as high as a sweltering 41 degrees Celsius. That is a mind-bending 100-degree annual temperature swing. And because the permafrost prevents melting snow from draining away, the surrounding area turns into countless stagnant pools, resulting in literal apocalyptic plagues of mosquitoes during the hot summer months.
Section 4. Eurasia's isolated logistical island.
Surviving the city is one thing, but simply getting there, that's another story entirely. Yakutsk holds the crazy title of being the largest city in Eurasia not directly connected to a year-round road network. The main artery, the Lena Highway, notoriously turns into an impassable muddy quagmire during the spring rains. You can fly, sure, but flights are regularly delayed by visibility issues from the ice fog or, incredibly, by temperatures dropping so low that even the jet fuel begins to freeze.
Ironically, the brutal winter is actually the easiest time to travel overland. Because there's no bridge spanning the massive Lena River to reach the city, residents just wait for the deep freeze. When the temperatures plummet, the river freezes solid, essentially transforming into a natural, massive ice highway. For months, cars and huge supply trucks literally drive directly over the frozen river to get in and out of the city.
So, the crucial point is what happens in between all this. During the spring and fall shoulder seasons, the ice is too thin for trucks, but it's too thick and choked with icebergs for summer ferries. Even when the ferries do run in the summer, a single crossing can cost 15% of a median monthly wage, and you're leaving people waiting in line for hours. During these transition periods, the city becomes completely cut off. It turns into a hyper-expensive logistical island. This drives the cost of basic goods sky high, and it forces desperate people to actually risk their lives attempting to cross the thin ice.
For decades, there's been talk of building a permanent bridge over the Lena River. The estimated cost right now sits at a ballooning $1.7 billion. However, the project has been perpetually delayed since the 1980s. The sources impartially note that these delays are the result of a cascade of historical and geopolitical shocks: the chaotic collapse of the Soviet Union, the 2014 annexation of Crimea diverting funds, the global pandemic, and most recently, the massive financial strain and sanctions tied to the ongoing war in Ukraine. Without federal funding, the bridge remains just a distant dream.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Yakutsk is, to quote our source directly, a fascinating human city that spits in the face of most common sense. It's a place built entirely by the pursuit of shimmering wealth, maintained by staggering engineering, and completely isolated by a ruthless climate. It really is a testament to human stubbornness and adaptability. But as the climate warms and the very frozen earth it sits upon begins to melt, we have to ask, how long can this 400,000-person battle against nature actually last? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the world around you, and I'll catch you on the next one.